Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane and Hurricane HD video blog for Friday, the 17th of August, 2012. Tropics getting more and more busy here. We see a larger increase in convection overall compared to what we saw the last few days. Look out here near Africa, a definite increase in convective activity. A few cotton ball areas popping up here in and around the western Atlantic, and then we have the remnants of TD7 and the southwest Gulf. All part of that slightly more favorable upward motion pulse, the MJO, swinging into a little bit more favorable position in the western hemisphere. A broader satellite perspective, we can see a lot of moisture starting to gather here in association with 94L, that investigation area south of the Cape Verde Islands. This is the southern half of Gordon up here, cut off by the satellite extent frame. And then we have TD7's remnants trying to make a comeback. This could sit down here, then come back out over the water, and end up here in the central Gulf Coast for the mid part of next week. We'll examine that piece by piece here, and then on the GFS model throughout this video blog. So here it is, the leftovers TD7 trying to organize, but enough of it over land that it's going to have a hard time doing so. But there's a front coming down, and that'll help to draw this back out over the water. And I think at the very least, you folks up here along the central Gulf Coast are going to be in for a wet and breezy, stormy period at the mid part of next week, with a chance anyway, since it's August and we have a disturbance down here that could come your way, that you may see tropical storm conditions over parts of the central Gulf Coast next week. So definitely keep an eye on your app here and your different internet sources for hurricane info, because it could be a busy week for the central Gulf Coast next week. I don't see a hurricane threat, but tropical storm coming up here can be disruptive. Heavy rains, squally weather, and even a coastal storm surge. You know how vulnerable the central Gulf Coast can be. Here is that front coming down. That'll lay down across the Gulf enough to focus the energy from this tropical system and the moisture and the convergence associated with the front, that we just might squeak something out here for next week. If it does, and the system in the Atlantic doesn't get named first, then this one would be the H storm, or Helene, for what it's worth. Here's Gordon sitting out here, heading towards the Azores Islands. Eventually, it might still make it to hurricane intensity. This system is almost a shoe-in to eventually become a hurricane. I would say, I think 90% chance that it'll do so. Large envelope of energy trying to bundle and gather. Still a lot of dry air around, so it's going to take its sweet time as it moves off to the west. This, of course, Invest area 94L, and a lot of people will be watching this throughout the next week, I am sure. Looking at the GFS, the Global Forecast System from the 12Z run today, here's Gordon, here's 94L, and here's our system in the Gulf. This is all valid tomorrow morning, so this is Saturday morning's forecast from the GFS. This is the output. This is Sunday morning, and then finally Monday morning we go out 72 hours here, and as I showed you, lots of moisture streaming into the central Gulf Coast from this system down here in the southwest Gulf, trying to organize and wrap up. You remember Umberto in 07, how quickly it developed, so you never turn your eye away from these things and say, yeah, it's not going to do anything. It's the middle to latter part of August coming up, and you don't ignore these heat sources out here over this such warm water in a climatologically favored area at that. Then we have out here 94L trying to do whatever it's going to do. The longer it takes to develop, the more west it'll track. You watch, that'll definitely be the case. What became Gordon came off farther north, and it was able to turn northwest almost immediately. This is a different pattern down here, and I think this is going to make it to the west quite a bit more than Gordon did. Gordon sitting up here by Monday morning, having passed through the Azores. 96 hours out, Tuesday morning, you see what I'm talking about. Definitely some moisture surging into the Gulf Coast, if not a bona fide tropical system. We'll just have to wait and see how fast things can come together. Then we have 94L out here. Will it be a depression by this point? Will it still be struggling against itself? As I mentioned, I'm serious. The longer that it takes to gather and it gets west of 40 degrees longitude here, the more the odds are that it will impact land somewhere. First possibly being the islands, and then maybe, just maybe, the east coast of the United States. Huge question mark, because we just don't know for sure. If we go out to day 5, the GFS indicating that this does ramp up well east of the islands here. Most of the systems that have developed the last 6 years that tracked north of 20 degrees latitude here that were hurricanes turned out to sea somewhere in this corridor right here. Almost every one of them. Only Irene last year that came up the east coast, and Ike in '08, which dipped up to well north of 20 and then came back down again before hitting Texas. Only 2 have hit the U.S. in 6 years out of many, many hurricanes. Almost all of them turned somewhere around 60 degrees of longitude, plus or minus 10 degrees. So I would say that being the case, that odds favor that this will turn on out somewhere near that same corridor, but you never know. You never know. That's why we have to watch these things. And nobody really knows. Don't think that somebody knows and they're holding it back. The models are doing what they can, and we're already looking out here at 5 days. Here's day 6 and here's day 7, and you see what happens with this system. It starts to trek off to the northwest. The GFS wants to hand it off to the central Atlantic trough out here. The question is, will that trough really be there? So we'll watch and see. A very active pattern coming up. First area to watch will be the central Gulf Coast, as will be the coast of Mexico, as that system sits down there today and throughout the weekend. Just a fairly unsettled pattern across this whole region over here as we move through the weekend. And then early next week, we will definitely be watching what happens with 94L and how quickly it develops and where it heads once it does, assuming that it does. And it probably will. I think conditions are finally favorable, that we're going to have an active 2 to 3 weeks coming up, and a lot can happen in that time frame. So stay alert and make sure you got everything ready in case a hurricane does come knocking on your door. So far, we've done all right this season, but that might change, and we want you to be ready. All right, I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. That's my website. Always a pleasure to provide these video blogs to Hurricane and Hurricane HD. And with that being said, I'll be doing those throughout the weekend to keep you informed.